Hello and welcome to Writing Through the Rough Patches, an interview series for writers ready to bring their book into being. Today I am speaking with Alex Mitchell, who is an independent book coach and editor based on a pineapple farm on the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, Australia, which just sounds like paradise to me. And we're going to be talking about planning your book. She has helped hundreds of local and interstate authors to achieve their book publishing dreams. Alex has a reputation for being incredibly generous and freely sharing her extensive knowledge of the book planning and publishing process in a really down-to-earth, accessible style. She offers one-to-one coaching, small group author workshops and Skype consultations, and you can find her online at authorsupportservices.com. So welcome, and it's great to have you along today.
Thanks for having me here, Tamara. It's lovely to be with you.
Great. So today we're talking planning, all things planning. So just to really start at the beginning, let's just go right back to basics. Why is planning so important for writing a book? And how does it function in a really practical kind of a way?
Well, I've found that often authors get partway through writing their book and they find that they have a lot of words written, but they still don't have a book. Their writing goes around in circles and often in tangents, and it doesn't quite get to the point. And that's because they didn't have a plan in place. There wasn't a goal, and if you don't have a goal of where you're trying to go with your writing, it's very hard to reach it. It's sort of just an idea out there in the ether that you're trying to write about. So it's very hard to get there clearly. So a book plan is where you get really clear on what your message is, who your market is, and what structure your book is going to take, so that then you can freely write, but you've got some framework to put it into.
Yeah, right. So rather than sitting down and just saying, I'm going to write a book, you can actually then get a little more specific and actually start writing this part of the book or that part of the book, and you know that it's all going to hang together in the end. Is that kind of the concept?
That's right. It'll all hang together in the end. And if you imagine that you've got all of your chapters laid out there, but they're all blank, when you write something, you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you've got this amazing thing that you want to say, you can say it and then you can pick it up and say, this fits in chapter 15, and you can pop it in there and it fits somewhere. It does something that has a purpose. It doesn't have to be rewritten, because that's actually what I find is the most expensive part of editing for clients, is rewriting what they've done because it didn't fit with where they were trying to go with their book.
Oh, terrific. So it's kind of like planning streamlines it all as well, so that you're not repeating yourself or, as you said, having to rewrite or reshape something to actually fit what you're trying to do.
That's exactly right,
That's excellent. So have you found, does plan for everyone, or are some people not planners?
Different. Yeah,
okay.
Some people are not planners, and a lot of my clients come to me and say, I'm not a planner, and look at this mess I made. I feel for them, I really do, because they're not planners, and writing attracts very creative types, and so for a lot of people they see planning as being the opposite of being creative. How can you do both at the same time? And I find that it still does work. Everybody's different kind of writer, and every book is really different, but all books need the same sets of questions asked of the author, because in the end you have to be meeting the needs of the reader. In order for your book to work, it's not about you anymore. It has to be about the reader. And so if they receive what you're trying to say, then you've done your job. So you need to be inside their mind and looking at, well, how does it look for them? Rather than brain dumping from your side, it's an actual learning process for them.
Yeah, that is so interesting, because that's really about sort of giving them what they need, rather than, as you said, rather than coming from that selfish point of view of, well, I've got so much to say. It's really setting up that relationship with the reader as well.
It is. It's a strange relationship that authors have with their book, because writing is such a me-central place. You're writing from your own passion. You're writing about what you know yourself. You're developing your own stories. but the product that you develop is not about you at all. It's about the person who receives it. So it's very hard to make that jump from it being about me to it being about you.
That's a great point, and I think that as authors get more down the track of writing, they get more used to that idea. So we were talking about whether planning works for everyone, but are there different sorts of plans that people can use?
Well, there are some different ways of putting things together. I think essentially you're looking at the same ingredients, but it's how you put it together. There are different ways of structuring your chapters. There are different models of learning that you can do. I use a post-it note model to put together all of the chapters, and I find that really works well for a lot of people. For some people, they like a snowflake model where you start with a small idea and grow it bigger and bigger and bigger over time. So there are different ways of putting those together, but the overall structure of a book remains static. It's just how we get there. So it's different people's learning styles.
Yeah, so I'm figuring that I guess people would have a fairly good idea of their linear, or whether they need to sort of make a massive chaotic looking map, or whether they need to sort of actually stick things up on a wall or that kind of thing to actually get the best out of it for themselves.
Yeah, and they sometimes don't know that until we're part the way through that process. So we'll go through the process and ask these questions about where you're going and who is it for and what is it you're trying to say. And then it becomes clear to me how they like to learn, and we can look at some different ways of putting together a plan and see what works for them, and then we'll soon find out how they work best.
That is great. So I just was thinking, quite a lot of the time when I work with people, they come to me, and even if they've had a plan, partway through they'll sort of go, oh, but at that point I had all these new ideas and I went off on that tangent, and suddenly they're writing kind of off down in the woods somewhere and the path is over here. So what about tangents? What happens? Do you follow them or not follow them?
Well, I guess it all depends. It depends where you're trying to get to in the end. And if the tangent is a different route towards where you're trying to go, then that's great, because often when you start the book, you knew where you were trying to go and you had a plan for getting there, but you didn't know these different little crossroads you would come to on the way and the realisations that you would have. So if you find a better way to achieve what you wanted, then that's great. It's not set in stone, a book plan. It's like a business plan. It's something that gives you a framework to work from, but the idea is to keep revisiting it. Is this still working? Is it still the best way? I've had this fantastic idea. How can I fit that in? And it needs to have that flexibility to move around with the author so that you get the best outcome from the book, not so that you can endlessly jam more things in there. Just want to make that clear.
It is such a temptation for so many people.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just trying to reframe in my mind the plan being revisited again and again, and kind of reshaped to reflect the new knowledge that comes out of someone who's writing a book. Especially with first-time authors who I've worked with, there's this need for the security of the plan, and if you start changing the plan, it can really destabilise someone. So actually working that in and saying, no, well, this is a normal part of the process would probably really help.
Yeah, it can be very reassuring for people, and it comes back again to the personality type and the learning style. Some people need to have that freedom so they don't feel trapped, and some people need the security of a really solid plan so that they feel secure and feel that they know where they're going. So it's what's going to work best for them, but how to gently direct it so that it does end up in the place we want to go.
That's right. So, I can see that planning's really useful in a lot of ways. It helps you organise your material. Is there anything else that a plan's really good for?
Well, a plan is helpful all along the way. It can help you with your timing for the book so that you know where you are in the process. You've got a fair idea of how much longer it's going to take, and you also know when you're finished. So that might be a timeline that you know when you're finished, but it also is a time to put aside your other ideas and save them for another project. It gives you a finish line so that you can say, well, that's the point that I wanted to make in this book, and all those other things I've thought about, they belong in another book because that's what this book's going to be about. So it can help you know when you're done and know when to put your pen down and stop fiddling with it. And it also help you to have something to work towards for those people who need a finish line, who need a date to be finished by. If we set out a plan where you're doing a chapter a week and you know you've got 15 chapters, you're going to have a date there when you're going to be finished writing, and that can really be helpful psychologically to keep you motivated and also let you know that it's going to be over pretty soon.
Oh, that's fantastic, because quite a lot of the time people think about planning as, the first thing you do, or something that happens at the beginning, and then, the reviewing of the plan and things. Some people might think of it, but some might not. But, I think that idea of the plan giving you a finishing point, both in a time sense and also in, the concept sense, in let's not try and stuff more ideas in here. This is the point. You've reached it, stop. As you said, and I love it, leave it and, actually save the idea for something else. So that is fantastic. And so what would you say is your one best piece of advice to writers about planning that they can actually take away and do today?
Well, I look at planning as being a little bit like baking a cake. And if you have a lot of great ingredients and you stick them in the oven without putting them in a cake tin first, you're going to end up with a great big mess. But if you put them in a cake tin, then you'll end up with a beautiful cake. So you do need to start at the very beginning with the ingredients. And the first 3 ingredients of a book plan are to ask yourself some questions about what are you trying to say, why are you writing, and who will read it. And if you spend some time sitting down answering those questions honestly with yourself, you'll probably find them quite enlightening. They seem very simple, but they give you a lot of insight about exactly where you're trying to go and what you're trying to say and who it is that's going to be listening. And they'll lead on to being able to make a plan that's going to meet those ideals. So there's a little bit of homework to do.
That's terrific. So they're 3 terrific questions that people can actually ask themselves today about their books. Would you say they could ask that even if they've begun their books already?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you've begun your book and you're wondering whether, should I include this, shouldn't I include it, where's this going, go back to those questions and ask yourself those questions. Get really clear. Who is the person who's reading this book? Who do I imagine that I'm speaking to while I'm writing this book? Who's in this conversation? Are they interested in that? Is that something that they want to know about? Therefore, I'll include it. Or then I'll know that it's not to be included and that I should keep it for something else. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So thank you so much. They're 3 terrific questions to really start people off on that process of planning out their book. I know that you run events and that kind of thing. Do those questions lead into something deeper in your workshops?
They do. They're the 3 questions that we really start our workshops with. There's a great one-day event where you can plan out your whole book in a day, and we do start with those 3 questions, and we use the answers to those questions to lead on to other questions like which voice you should be writing in as an author, and then how are we actually going to put this together, what are we trying to say, and we actually sit down and do plan out your chapters over the day. So the next one of those events is on the 28th of November on the Sunshine Coast, and we do have one Skype place at each of those events as well. So if you hop on to authorsupportservices.com, have a look at the events there, you'll see when the next one is.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And I would encourage everyone to check that out because if you can't be at the Sunshine Coast in person, Skype is the very next best thing. And thanks so much for spending time with me today talking about planning a book, Alex. That's really wonderful. And there is just so much useful material in all of your answers that I'm sure that everyone listening will be so much clearer on how and why planning a book can be so useful for the beginning the middle and the end of the book writing process. And once again, I have been speaking with Alex Mitchell of authorsupportservices.com. Do go to her website to check out that workshop and more of her practical and useful advice. And Alex, lovely to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Tamara.